Well, welcome back to this exciting episode of Voices of Video. And we are into, dare I say, an unofficial next season, the new season of Voices of Video. We did take a little bit of a hiatus there at the end of last year, and it's so good to be on the microphone, recording again, interviewing with so many amazing practitioners, experts building great stuff in the ecosystem, video streaming, video encoding. And today I'm joined again by Joe Waltzer, who is the CEO and the founder of Arcadian. So first of all, Joe, welcome.
Hey, thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me again. It was great doing this with you last season, and I'm thankful
That's
that
right.
you invited me back for the next one. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. Well, I'm really happy for us to have this conversation because you've been supporting a number of our clients and our customers who are building some really sophisticated workflows. And I thought it might be interesting to have you walk through the common functional building blocks that you encounter as someone who is retaining you to, either build a video streaming service or a platform, or maybe to, make upgrades or to,
Absolutely.
add features, et cetera, because I think it's really important that we bring to the industry the end-to-end perspective. I always say that NETINT sells engines, but the reality is very, very, very few people that I know actually can build a car. I actually do have a friend, by the way, who actually does literally build cars as his hobby. He's like
what a fun hobby.
Yeah. But he literally, he'll take an old classic 68 Mustang, which he's working on right now, or I think it's a 70, strip the thing down to a frame, you don't even know what it is, and then he'll put a modern engine in it and put all kinds of braking system, et cetera, but for most of us, we need to go down to the Honda dealer and, test drive a few cars and
about cars,
walk out with something that I don't have to build, right?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I love that analogy, though, because, we have found, and this is even why our two companies have engaged so closely, and, we're going to be announcing some really exciting partnerships, even in terms of you helping more specifically, with professional services and some of the requirements of very large customers. Why don't we start with walk us through, what the systems are, when I say the functional blocks, but the systems are in a modern, or shall we say kind of typical video streaming workflow.
Absolutely.
And I think that'd be a great place to start our conversation.
Yeah, great. So I would say there's 5 sort of general, and these obviously, depending on specific situations, some of these are the same system, but do different tasks. So they're not always a completely separate thing, but we usually have what we would call a CMS, content management system. And that is what controls the flow of data through whatever system you're using. For a modern mobile or, TV-based app, that sort of lays out your headers and what images you want to do in marketing. We use is sort of, say here's the data we want to show on this website thing. So CMS is a very standard thing. Obviously websites use it all the time, but we see that a lot. There's always some sort of system to control the flow of the data. So there's always a CMS out there that we got to talk with, or that, we're tying into. There's almost always a DAM, some sort of, or a MAM, digital asset management or media asset management system. And that's the system that just says, here's all the stuff I have. Here's all the videos. Here's all the subtitles, here's all the audio tracks, here's the different cuts of the movies. And those are usually controlled by 2 very different departments as well. So there's usually a media distribution team at the studios or at some of these big companies that control all of that content, and they have a MAM or a DAM that they're using to sort of keep track of what they have. That's very common to see in these workflows. And then you'll have a distribution system, and I'm lumping that together because that gets really complicated, but that's the app itself, right? There's an iOS or Android app somewhere, or there's a smart TV app or a website or whatever you're using to actually show to users. But behind that, there's a CDN, right? So the media's got to be distributed close enough so it doesn't buffer. So there's CDNs. And then there's APIs and a whole bunch of stuff that powers all of that. And the CMS will be integrated into that. So some people will merge those two, but the CMS I have separate because there's usually a different integration point with the apps and those APIs. So there's a distribution system out there that is obviously that's the end result. So there's always a distribution system somewhere that needs to be talked to. And then the other one is there's transcoding. So that's the one that takes the media from generally the DAM and then controlled by the CMS, and it's told how to get from this format to that format, because there's 100,000 different ways to package media for different platforms and OSs and screen sizes and
resolutions and bit rates and codecs and frame rates and color bit depth and
different versions of 4K and obviously I'm glossing over all the details. Every one of these systems gets very specific and very detailed, and there's lots of just technical sort of intricacies with each one of them, and some of them are bespoke and they're custom made, and some of them are off the shelf and they have different integration points and issues and limitations, and some of them are 10, 15 years old. They've been built on for years. People keep reusing the same systems. Lots of complications with all of these points. And then there's one that's sort of out there that's not quite as known to most people, but it's the Avail system. We always put that aside because that's sort of the legal and compliance system that gets missed. And that is a really important part of almost all distribution networks that doesn't get talked about enough, is that there's always some method to say, this is something you can distribute. This is something that is legal to distribute. This is approved by corporate. Someone hasn't already sold these rights. You're allowed to do it. We don't see that in all of these instances and workflows, because a lot of companies just own everything and they're just like, we're not worried about Avails. We have the rights. And depending on sort of how they've managed their IP, that system is skipped in the sense that we don't have access to it. They're only sending us stuff that they already have rights to. So we don't always deal with an Avail system, but it's somewhere up the chain and you got to be ready for it and understand the complications that come with it.
I would actually argue that if you're dealing with any licensed content, I guarantee there is an Avail system. It just might be as simple as a geo block.
Absolutely. It's
so
great.
So it may not be, on some per title, there may not be some window, where something's coming available and then it's going away.
Yeah.
And then all the complexities, but there could be a geo block. Well, a geo block is an Avail, if you think about it.
That's exactly right. I didn't think about that way.
This in the US and Canada, not Mexico. Well, then I better know if my user's in Mexico, or at least do my best, to try and determine that.
Everyone has a geo block. I think everyone does that.
Yeah, exactly.
No one has full rights for worldwide distribution. It's always a thing.
If you're talking user-generated content, then maybe not. But even then, it's fascinating to think, there can be decency laws, and so there could be certain types of filtering maybe that has to happen in certain countries or regions, or even certain types of content that can't be shown. Well, that's an Avail. If you think about it.
Absolutely. Not everyone's doing all their business in every country. I think YouTube has its limits for, where they want to send all of their content. So it's a great point. It's as complicated as you can imagine, and probably as complicated as you can make it. And they've all got to talk to each other, and they've all got to work right together, because if they don't, sometimes there's some huge legal issues there, right? We don't run into that quite a lot, but the potential is there. So you have to be aware of what is required and what's happening, and you have to be able to tie it all together, because if you don't, huge mistakes that can be made that can cause real problems.
During the pandemic, and this was not relevant exactly to like availability of content in countries. But although, Netflix, as they were expanding, 8 or 10 years ago, into various countries, they certainly did run into some issues where, the national filmmakers and, the government's like, hey, we want to support our movie industry, so we don't want you to just bring in, so you need to bring a certain percentage of, whatever, French films or Italian films or, whatever. But I can remember during the pandemic, early on in the pandemic, when I think it was the European Union, but there were some European countries and I believe UK even, although with Brexit, there. But anyway, UK, we'll consider them part of Europe in this discussion. We're actually saying that Netflix had to cut their bit rates because of internet traffic. and there were some valid and, in my personal opinion, maybe not so valid reasons, why they would say that. But it doesn't matter is the point. Whether you agree with it or not, the point is that they have to adhere to that. And you can't be streaming a 20 megabit or an 18 megabit K file, and I'm going off memory, so a listener will have to fact check me, but I think it was around 10 megabits was like, they couldn't stream above 10 megabits.
Yeah,
Well, guess what that meant? It's going to be hard to deliver high quality 4K at 10 megabits. Guess what? You had to make sure in those regions you were only sending maybe 1080p, or maybe you were sending, kind of 2.5K or something.
Yeah. No, it's. I mean, we could probably talk forever just about all the wacky.
We could talk forever.
Yeah,
it becomes a little bit of a rabbit trail, but I do like but it shows, again, going back to kind of my extremely brief little intro. The reason why I'm excited to have this conversation with you is that, yes, we sell engines, but at NETINT, we have to know how, not only all the components of the car, but how each component interoperates. What are the, what happens if you have either a too small of a braking system, for example, so you've got 1,000 horsepower engine. Hey, it's the VPU, I like to think, is 1,000 horsepower engine. But what if your braking system is built for a 300 horsepower engine? Like, you could have a problem. Your car, your car could be in danger.
Well, also, if you've got a huge engine you spend a ton of money on, and it's not, you're getting nothing out of it because there's a problem with, like you said, your brakes or your tires, or there's some other system that isn't talking to it properly, and now you're like, why did I spend all this money on this great engine and I can't even get out of it?
Why did I do that?
It's a
Joe,
it's a problem.
You are working primarily in Hollywood with the largest studios, but, give us a quick overview again of the systems that you're building and the work that you're doing. And then we'll circle back around to talk into some more detail about, the whole streaming workflow and, what's your team.
Absolutely. So my company, Arcadian, touches all of those systems. We don't build Avail systems, obviously work with them, but everything else, distribution systems, transcoding systems, CMS, DAMs, we've built those sort of from scratch from different requirements from our clients. So we sort of are in all of those places. One of the things that we found as we've done this for the past 7 years now is that our real specialty is getting clients' projects to that 100% mark. When I was in the studio industry before that, you would get a third-party solution and you'd integrate it and you'd work with it, and it wouldn't do exactly what you wanted it to do. And you'd have to make some custom, and then you get all this kind of like, how do I do this? So our company mostly lives in between. We work with a bunch of people who have a solution, like they already have a DAM and they have a distribution and a platform. But to your point, they want to make that better. And so they want to get some VPUs and they want to put them in a server, and they maybe want to do it on-prem, and that's they can see the use case and the business use case for that, and it's going to save them lots of money. But then they're like, wait a minute, we got a DAM now has to talk to that thing. So, they've got this sort of problem of integrating everything together and then making it run properly. Like you said, the engine's got to talk to everything else. So that's where we spend a lot of our time. And we've built, apps that are streaming apps, iOS, Android apps, web apps. We built apps we did a Ride View app, which is in cars, or car-based streaming application. We've done some work with PlayStation, so we've been sort of all over at the end of the chain, but most of our real work has been in that upstream, getting all of those platforms, those legacy platforms, those things that don't normally talk together, to talk to each other and do it in a way that's efficient and it works, and it maximizes all of that stuff. So that's where most of our conversations end up with our clients. Is they have X, they want to get it to Y, they've kind of figured out Z in the middle there. It's not enough to get it to production. It's not working exactly how they want it to, and they want us to sort of fix it. So
how much, I'm curious, how much of your work is, I'm going to call it integration, which again is incredibly important, but how much is integration and how much is building something brand new, either new app or, I'm just curious.
That's a good question. I'd say it's probably 50-50, because there's always the integration usually comes after the discussion for the app. So someone will say, I have some content and I want to build an app. and we'll use RadView. That was one of our successful apps. I need to get this into a car, and I wanted to stream into a car.
Are you able to say what car?
Yeah, it was Sony. Yes, it's in Mercedes and VinFast. So yeah, that's all out there. Check out RadView. If you have a Mercedes, you'll see RadView and VinFast. So that's usually what we get to. Like, hey, we have this sort of RFP, or request for proposal, for building an app that works in a Mercedes car. And that's great. We'll sit down and have those conversations. We have a whole process we go through where we sort of have discovery, and we sit with the client, understand their needs. And then as we start having those in-depth conversations, we realize that, okay, where is the content coming from? And they may or may not have a distribution system for some other app. So, okay, now we have to like fork that and tie into that. And now we have an integration point. And this is, this is in a car. And now we have to transcode this, because what we're using now doesn't work with the different outputs, different bit rates,
you need smaller bit rates, maybe even
audio formats are a big one. This car doesn't support this audio format. We need a new audio format. So now we're building another integration point, because they probably already have a transcoding platform, but it doesn't support the outputs they need. So now we're tying into that. And so I would say most of our work starts at the project level, where someone just has a solution in mind that they want to. I have a proposal, and then as we get deeper and deeper, we tend to end up building more upstream to sort of support that all end to end. And that's, I would say that's a pretty normal workflow for us, is to start with the idea and then get to the integration.
Yeah, it's the fact that you're able to engage at the how do I say it? I was going to say like the conceptual point, but in a way that's what it is.
Absolutely.
Because they have an idea, right? And maybe it was mandated, like, go figure this out. Or maybe it's literally like, hey, I wonder, we've got this library of content, or there's this opportunity. I wonder if we could build something around that. So they have to come talk to you, and you're bouncing ideas back and forth. It's fascinating. And this is, I guess I'm almost going to be pre-announcing a little bit, which is okay, because, we're already bringing you into opportunities, NETINT opportunities. And really, I would argue 100% of the cases, but, maybe there's a green field out there I'm not thinking about. But when we're selling VPUs, the customer has an existing system or platform or something. It's not like they're just, gee, we would like to encode video, And so by definition, they have a car. You can tell I like cars. I kind of naturally, gravitate towards that. So in fact, I can't quite see it in the video here, but over on that side, there's some cars up on the shelves there, so. Anyway, so it's like, we bring the engine, but, we bring the engine with the VPU, but they have a car today. So they're like, this is amazing, the most amazing engine, but what do I do with an engine? And so that's where we're bringing you in. And, in some cases, it's just a matter of saying, oh, okay, you're deployed on this, public cloud, and, it's very well understood, what that service is, how it works. We basically need to, rebuild the primary features, or maybe we integrate with some other commercial solution that's already integrated the VPU, but there's always additional work to be done. And then, occasionally it might be, hey, we're using a solution, but we're really not happy with it. Let's talk about building what we really want.
Absolutely.
And so that's again where you would be doing not as much or really any of the integration. You'd be literally building the platform.
Yeah, that's a lot of our conversation. I actually just had some interesting conversations with some potential clients this week that were just that. Like we see the benefit of this new engine, we see the benefit of this new thing, but it is a lot of VPU conversations, because they really are an amazing solution for a lot of people. And like you said, everyone's streaming, so who doesn't want to stream more efficiently? I mean, the answer is everyone. So they're all very excited, and then they sort of get stuck with like, this doesn't quite work. There's no drop-in solutions in this world. People might try to say a drop-in solution, but I've never seen anything.
By the way, there are no drop-in solutions. You're right.
It's all a little bit of a lie. There's always some integration point that you didn't think about. There's always some complication that you didn't quite consider. And then you get a little stuck and you're like, well, I don't know how to fix this. And now I don't know how to move forward. And so that's where we step in and have a lot of great conversations. Like, what are you trying to accomplish? Where are your pain points? And then me and my team, we've got all this great experience saying, okay, well, these are the solutions for some of these pain points. This is how you do this. And it's all very technical. We talked about those 5 things. They're all different. It's all custom. There's no one size fits all answer. And that's sort of our sweet spot, is we're there to get this project to the 100% mark, right? Because the drop-in solutions get you 80%, maybe 95 in the best case, but something's going to not work the way you think it is. And you're going to need to get some really deep technical stuff. And you don't want to have an internal team for that, because there's never enough work to maintain that team. So external teams like mine are great. You give us a call, it takes us we'll give you a quote, it's a month, 2 months, 2 weeks, depends on sort of the scope. And then we can solve your problem and hand it off to you. And there you go. We're there to support you for going forward. You call us if there's a problem.
Do you ever so I'm curious, post delivering the solution, do you ever get pulled into, like, even people say, gee, it'd be great if you could stick around and operate this for us, or, something that's a little more than just even like a maintenance agreement. I'm sure you have, kind of standard maintenance agreements, just so that they know they can call you and you're going to pick up the phone. But do you ever get pulled into more like even operating a platform?
All the time. We have a media services team that's different than our development team that does just that, operates a lot of these platforms, and they're transcoding specialists, so they can help with the complications of the actual transcode, not just the implementation of the workflow. So we do a lot of that, and we sort of pride ourselves on that. Oh yeah, content. Whatever we need. There's a whole nother world of how do we make sure this content is right and it's the right format, and we've got to test it because the audio tracks don't align or the subtitle tracks are off, and how do we work through that? And there's a whole world of just content issues that we could go into too, and we specialize in that as well, as helping users work through that, and then obviously building custom workflows to automate a lot of that and to speak truthfully about what's possible. Big subject. We have a lot of like, hey, can AI just do this? And the answer is, it depends on what your quality bar is. If you want the best quality stuff, AI is probably not there. But if you want like just sort of a quickie check, then okay, sure, it'll catch up some stuff. So just that's, I think, what I wanted to build Arcadian on, because I was in the industry. Service and being there for the client and working with them. And that's, we want to get repeat business. We want people to be able to call us when they have a problem and say, hey, we had a great time working with you before. Let's work again. I think that's just how you grow a company like ours, a services company, is to just be available, be honest, be upfront, and just have those discussions and just be clear with, well, hey, this is what we think. This is the best way forward, and go from there. And I think that's just I think that's just a good way to run a company, honestly.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, we're really excited to have you in the VPU ecosystem booth at NAB. And I know that, especially since you work extensively in Hollywood, and NAB obviously being, Vegas, so it's close, but it also is the show that all the studios attend and everybody goes to. So, so for, any listeners who are listening and intrigued or saying, wow, I think I could use someone like Arcadian, we need help, there'll be a great chance to go visit. Joe will be there. I know a few other members of his team, and, they'll be in our booth. That's the NETINT booth, the VPU ecosystem booth. I just think it'd be a great opportunity. Well, Joe, I would be remiss if I didn't pick your brain a little bit on what, it's not about like your prediction of the future in terms of either technologies that are going to, really catch fire, or, everybody wants to know codecs, is it going to be BBC or 82 or, it's like, and anymore. I'm like, yes, I have my opinions. We watch the market very closely. We talk to our customers a lot. So, we get a lot of data. But I'm curious to, just hear from you. What are your customers caring about today? What do they really care about? And I'm going to purposefully leave that very open and broad. You can answer that from a technical perspective, from a business, from whatever, just what are they caring about?
So the obvious answer is So the obvious answer is costs, right? Everyone is, hey, how do I do the same thing that's the age-old question. How do I do the same thing for less money or more efficiently? So I think a lot of our conversations start there. We have this process. It was working. Now it's not. Sorry, my cat just jumped up on the table, of course. Now it's not. And so how do we make this better? How do we fix it? There's a mandate to save money. There's a mandate to do that. So that's a big question. AI is obviously on everyone's mind. How can that help me save money is usually the question there. And then the other thing everyone's interested about is I think we've gotten to this point in the industry, and this is just my take and my limited sort of viewpoint, is that everyone's sort of figured out how to distribute the good stuff and get to the people. And Netflix is a worldwide, company, and they seem to have sort of plateaued with the number of users who are willing to pay for Netflix, and that's great. They're hundreds of millions of users, right? So I think we're at this point where, 300 million, something like almost that. So we've got to this point where all the networks have sort of figured out how to do what they do and distribute to the people they have. We've sort of turned this corner on distribution, and it's now becoming like, well, now that we've sort of sorted this out, how do we really squeeze every dollar we can out of this process, and how do we bring this to everybody everywhere? Because I think that's the next race, is sort of these underserved markets, the people that are everyone in the world wants to watch content. I mean, that's sort of this great part about this. The whole world is your market, honestly, right? I don't know anyone who doesn't want to watch a video, especially, of something that is relevant to them. So a lot of our clients are like, okay, great. We've put our stuff out there. We have a really powerful, it's a really robust streaming service. It's working amazingly. It was built for sort of these American and European markets, and the margins were built based on those prices. And we talk about AVOD and the ability to, get CPMs in the $20 range, things like that. But, that obviously doesn't work for the whole world. And we just see this sort of untapped rest of the world market. So how do we get more efficient? Because if we run the same models and we just put that in, like, say, Southeast Asian markets, we just won't make any money because it's not built for that. So that's when we start having conversations about VPUs and bringing maybe some stuff from the cloud to on-prem, and what are the places we can sort of really get efficient. And that's where we've had some really great conversations about. Let's take a look at what you've built, and let's see what you're trying to do, and let's see where we can help make the engine a little bit more powerful, but actually for less money. And so I think that's the next phase, is people trying to figure out how to bring this system they've built that's been very successful to the rest of the world. And then obviously you talk about back catalogs, you're talking about people that have really deep libraries that, how do I make this profitable? How do I bring this? Because people want to watch this old stuff. They don't always want to watch the latest thing. And that's been most of my interesting high level conversations, is about, we want to figure this out and dominate the market, because someone's going to figure out how to get this to everyone efficiently and how to make money on this for everyone. And whoever does that, that's YouTube's kind of ahead there, but everyone else is trying to figure it out too. And I think that's where we're at.
Yeah. We hear quite frequently, content is king. And as anyone who's, read some of my posts online or heard me on various, podcast interviews, whatever, knows I abhor this whole idea of streaming wars. I don't believe in it. It's absolutely a ridiculous concept. But, going along with that is this idea of content is king. If you just have sports, you're going to be rich. You're going to be successful. If you just have this, if you just have that. And reality is distribution is king. Distribution is king. And I love, what you're saying, because of course we see this because we're living it every day. We're enabling a lot of these services, but oftentimes people will say, when, they've deployed, or at some point through the sales process or whatever, they'll say, why we're really interested in this? Sure. We absolutely care about saving money, and we're going to save a ton. Yes, we want to reduce our energy footprint, and this does it. So, like, the obvious things, but that's not everything. Without this, we wouldn't even have a viable business. Or we wouldn't. I can think of several very large cloud gaming platforms where the very first one that deployed VPUs, and the second one said the same thing, but the very first one, they said, without VPU, we wouldn't even be able to offer to our customers a cloud. Yeah, and not from a technical perspective. Of course they could do it technically, but it would be so obscenely expensive operationally that, like, no one would even dream of it. And it's really fascinating, because when you shift the mindset of adopting technology, not as just it's better, it's faster, it's cheaper, but better, faster, cheaper is good. But if it's an enabler to something that couldn't exist,
mm-hmm.
That's where the value is created. And so I just love that because, and obviously, we talk a lot. And so, I know about the engagements that you're both working on and have worked on. And, and I know that it's an enabler to being able to offer content, build a service that couldn't exist otherwise, and that's a wonderful place to be.
It is. It's a great point. We just had another conversation with a potential client about that same thing. And you see things like the sports streaming rates are they're going up and up and up because sports know that content is king, as they say, and that they just are charging more and more and more. You can look at the deals the NFL's making to just see how that's getting nuts. And then they're not going to, those prices aren't coming down. So all these people that have these rates are like, I got to save money somewhere else because the sports rates are going up and up and up. But now my costs can't just go up. People at some point will stop. So we've had some interesting conversations about how do I take these sports rights and how do I distribute them as efficiently as possible? Because like you said, for the cloud gaming, if you can't afford to do it, then the market's just not there for you. And these are enablers. It's a great way to put it. Just being able to open up a new line of revenue, a new way of doing things is people are sort of opening their eyes to like, this is possible now. I can make this work. The technology is there, the ability to deliver this in an efficient way is there, and now I can open up all these new markets. Those are the most exciting conversations to have because we have quite a few of those around sports, back catalogs, like I mentioned, that people like it just was never efficient to do a back catalog distribution because it's just really hard and there's a lot of work. And now that things are just getting, I don't want to say it's simpler because it's still complex, but it's more approachable and it's achievable, it's doable. And I think that's changed in the last 5 years because even 5 years ago, you would just say, it's not, you can't do it. It's not financially viable at this point to do what you want to do. So we just have to wait. But yeah, VPUs have unlocked a lot of those conversations for us for sure that, oh, wow, I can do this now. And we have people say that's the recognition. Oh, wow, it's that cheap. And like, yeah, it is. And like, oh, I have thoughts now that I have unlocked this, then let me get back to you with what we want to do with this ability.
And it's fascinating, circling back around on the cloud gaming. The other thing is it's opening up new entertainment experiences. Like, okay, if you're satisfied or if you just don't need a codec that's more efficient than H.264, and if 720p or 1080p at the highest resolution is adequate, and if you're willing to crush the bit rate a little bit, actually it is possible because a lot of people are doing it to just continue to run software on commodity CPUs, x86, spin it up on your favorite public cloud and have a great day. Many workflows are still built on that. But the problem is that the consumer has not stayed there. The consumer now is carrying around a phone with OLED display on the phone that is, in some cases, they're native 4K, which is absolutely incredible how small those pixels are, but they look absolutely amazing. And so now the consumer's going, well, wait a second, why does this not look good? And then you put it up on a TV and it's like, well, wait a second, Netflix looks awesome. Why does this service over here or my local cable company or whatever, why does that not look good? And it becomes a reference, right? And so the consumer is now pushing then this is pushing everybody architecturally to technologies that can cost effectively, so meaning affordably, deliver 4K, encode, with high quality, but at reasonable bit rates, all the things that you need. So cloud gaming is fascinating because still, we have a couple extremely large platforms that use VPUs, and there still is a little bit of a perception across the industry, like, okay, it's fine, but it's certainly not going to be your AAA games, not going to be your AA games. It's going to be your, the leisure games, backgammon online, chess online. The games are a little better than that. But the point is, like, don't even dream. Well, it turns out that now, because GPUs are so amazing, so they can render these games with very, very high capacity, high density. The real bottleneck in these cloud gaming platforms is in the encoding. It's in the hardware encoding. And so all of a sudden it's like, well, wait a second. If we were to rethink how we're doing this and not use our built-in encoder in some SoC, which is probably a 10-year-old chip, which probably the quality is not so great. It's using H.264. It's not using HEVC or AV. Now not only are you enabling cloud gaming, but you're now enabling the games that people would have said you're dreaming to be able to. There's no way you're going to deliver, a AAA title with fast action at 60 frames at 4K, because the bandwidth is in all of our homes now, so I'd say all of our homes. I'm speaking of North America, I'm obviously different regions of the world, but even, I just recently got back from a trip through Asia, and I know we had a chance to connect on that trip, and, using my virtual sim and, just on my iPhone, I frequently was at 30 or 40 or 50 megabits.
Yeah. The world is catching up for sure.
Yeah. And it's not, and I wasn't in Tokyo, or I wasn't in, Beijing or Shanghai, or, the point is, it's not like I wasn't way out in remote areas, but, I wasn't in a city where it's like, okay, but you were in,
Yeah, no.
I would expect
a lot of people would expect to not have that kind of service, but it's there. Yeah, it's true.
It was just really mind opening to me. Like, okay, bandwidth, and it's going to be 5 to 7 years before even satellites are, I mean, it's just going to be, bandwidth will be ubiquitous. Now, that doesn't mean free. It doesn't mean, obviously, if there's a huge building that's blocking the satellite, well, okay,
sure.
You're still going to have a problem, right? But, bandwidth is there. So now what we're talking about is the new compute architectures.
Yeah.
Are you seeing this? Because I know you're talking to customers building all kinds of cool stuff. And I mean, does this resonate?
Absolutely. It's a great point. It's you want to be where the customers are. Like, so for cloud gaming, the customers have an expectation. They have what they want, and it doesn't matter what you want to give them. If you can't meet their expectations, whether they're realistic or not, it doesn't matter. The customer's like, I don't want to play 720p. Whatever the latest game is. I'm not having games a while.
I don't want 30 frames per second.
Yeah, they just won't play.
60.
And so you feel like, then this isn't a viable business. And, we've seen obviously some of these businesses close, but then as you dig a little deeper, you realize that it's, first of all, it's coming and you want to be ready for it. So like you said, the infrastructure, the networking, cellular it's everywhere now. We have satellites that are doing Starlink is literally worldwide. And I've been to places in the middle of nowhere where they're getting a Starlink signal, and you can game and play. Also, you can stream 4K there. And that wasn't even around 5 years ago. So everyone is seeing this trend where the world is getting connected quick, and everyone knows that everyone loves content. They want to play games. They want to watch videos, and everyone has a limited amount of attention. And this is something that we've had a lot of conversations for. Everyone's saying that basically everyone's attention at this point is saturated, especially in places like the States. You've only got so much time in a day to be on a screen. So now you're fighting for the quality of that attention, and that's a very limited commodity. You can't come out with some junky service. You'll just get pushed away by the service that's doing what you're trying to do, but doing it better. So everyone understands it. It's the world's moving fast, and people are seeing these trends, and they want to get ready for it now, because the first person there who does it successfully, the first person who gets that attention block, it's really hard to push that person, that attention aside, because people will just be like, hey, this is my cloud gaming service. This is the service I use. It works great. It meets all my needs. Why would I try another service? It's really hard, as everyone knows, to sort of break in with, you have to have a better service then. And so I think most of the conversations we have, especially around video streaming, but gaming is probably the same thing. We want to be there when the users get there. And that's soon. We're saying 2 years for Starlink to be everywhere. You got to start planning your systems now. You got to start having your services ready today for when those clients are like, they get connected. So what you want to have when that Starlink dish gets delivered to that farm in the middle of Indonesia, and they turn it on, your service has got to be there waiting for that customer, because that's how you win customers and that's how you build services. So everyone's talking about.
I have an interesting question for you. You work with the studios, Hollywood studios, and we can't share the names, but they're the obvious ones. Hollywood studios are known for good reason. They spend $300 million on making a film. They want the quality, they want to preserve that quality through all distribution chains at the absolute highest possible. And even then some, if possible. So they are known to have the highest bar ever of any of the distribution or any of the content companies, I guess you would say, for quality. And yet, so the question that I have is this. So they have this very high bar. And yet at the same time, they have content that they can't afford to spend a lot of money, maybe encoding or processing, or there's something else about the dynamics of the business where there has to be a trade-off. How does a studio think about this? Because they're doing it, they're capitalists. They have an asset. They spent $300 million making the movie. They spent $300 million marketing the movie. They've got $600 million, sometimes even more, right? But, and I know budgets are shrinking, but still hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. They're not just going to go, well, we can't encode that, or we can't, distribute that in the quality that we deem, so we're just not going to do it. So how do they approach this balance and trade-off? You must be in some interesting conversations, where you hear them even debating this in real time. How are they thinking about this?
So we're always in that little bit of a conversation about that, about where's the line. And all the studios we've worked with, there's usually a department or a team that sort of sets those standards. And a lot of what they do is
eyes, right?
Yeah, the golden eye. I mean, these are people this is their job. They know what to look for. They know, they understand what to do. And a lot of that is not necessarily that they won't do a low quality version of something. I mean, they'll do a 480p if it makes sense financially for them, and they'll do 720, and they'll go low bit rate. There's some lower limits, but most of the quality is about sort of the core quality, so that the colors are not getting more messed up than they have to. Because a lot of what happens in transcoding is you do a lot of tweaking, you do a lot of changing settings and doing a bunch of things that are required to sort of meet this very fine line of, okay, this is 720, but it's good 720. And that's kind of a weird thing to say, but there's such a thing as a good 720 and a bad 720.
That absolutely is. That absolutely is. I mean, the Super Bowl, it was distributed in 4K, but it actually was 1080p 60 upscaled. But Comcast, and they put out a great blog post. Dan Rayburn talked about it, how they did this, they were using an iframe codec. And the Super Bowl looked amazing.
Yeah.
Looked absolutely amazing. And it's 1080p.
Yeah. I mean,
it's 1080p.
There's a lot of conversations around that. It's a great point that there's a technical limitation. Everyone understands that. And they want to find solutions for that technical limitation of transcoding and distributing. But there's also a quality conversation that also has to be met. It's part of every conversation. I've never had a conversation in the studio where we build a workflow and someone said, I don't care what it looks like. That just isn't going to happen. Someone is going to review it upstream that is, like you said, the golden eye, and say, okay, this is acceptable, is probably maybe the right word. But they're going to review it and approve all of these workflows. And someone for the Super Bowl, I'm sure there was someone who said, this is the 4K upscaling is done right. It meets our quality standards. Quality is, it's never not been part of the conversation. It's a great point. It's something else to take into consideration for sure for all these workflows.
But I think it's interesting, and I just want to point out a nuance when you talk about quality, because, and look, it is absolutely the case that no two studios, no two streaming services, no two video platforms are going to view the word quality, and I really do put that in quotes, the same way. One, could care, about certain kinds of things, either based on maybe their content, or something they clearly know about their audience and what their audience cares about, that the other one's like, we don't care about that, but this other, so that's always the case. But you said something that was interesting, is that I think sometimes, quality is looked at like, okay, if I put two reference displays side by side and I'm advancing frame by frame, can I see the macro block? Can I see the, and there's the image. And I've been in rooms with guys with their glasses on 6 inches off the screen, examining. That's one element of it. Okay. So I'm not making fun of that, but that's one element. But you said something. It's like, are you crushing blacks? Are you preserving color? Are you, some of those things. And I've been in sessions where like that was just completely dismissed. Nobody's looking at that. And I'm sitting here going, okay, that one clearly does not look as good, even though people are like, oh, I love how there's no banding. It preserves it, and I'm going, but look at the color. Like it doesn't look right, and people are like, oh yeah, well, but look, it does a better job on edges. It's like, okay, but it doesn't, but my eyes tell me that doesn't look real,
It's this really interesting hidden truth, I think, with consumers.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
And it's
this whole...
It's one of those things where people are like, does anyone care? Like, it's always a question, like, who cares if you crush the black? Would anyone notice? And you say to yourself, well, you know what? I bet you 95% of consumers would never even see it. It just would look weird to them. But it would look weird to them. And that's something that I don't think it's hard to quantify. I think your gaming, streaming, the cloud gaming is a great way to put it. If you make a game at 1080p, 60 frames a second, and you make a game at 720p, 30 frames a second, people will notice. They won't necessarily be able to verbalize what is wrong with that, but they'll be like, this is, the back of their brain will be like, this is less superior. I don't like this as much as something's wrong. And they're not going to call you and say, hey, this is 720, 30. They're going to just be like, I don't like this. And so that's why I think quality is this bar that the studios want to set, because they don't want to have that. They want to make sure that this is, it's an art form too. You want to stay true to what the director's visions are. And there's the whole, thing with that. But I think that the smart people, and not everyone's smart, but I think everyone sort of gets this in the back of their mind, that you don't want people to perceive your service as low quality, and having bad video transcoding and bad artifacting and those things. Some of it's obvious, but some of it's not. But everyone notices it. And I've seen that before. And so that's, I think, why it's a really important discussion to have about quality. One of the great ways to think about it too, because video can be a little tricky to describe, is subtitling. So we do a lot of quality checks for subtitling. And when a subtitle is off and it's not quite aligned to the speaking, everyone here would be like, it hurts your brain. And go try to watch a video that has a misaligned subtitle. Yeah. It's almost unwatchable at some point. Same with misaligned audio. Misaligned audio will stand out immediately, and you'll be like, I can't watch this. This makes me crazy.
Oh, lip sync. And it reminds me, Joe, and you've been in the studio ecosystem for a long time. So this will really resonate with you. Maybe you even know the demo I'm talking about. I am pretty certain it was TA years ago. And when I say years ago, like it would have been 20 years, maybe even 25 years ago, which shows how long I've been sort of at all this, did a demo. And what the demo was super high quality video with low quality audio, like audio that was just clearly, was low resolution, it just clearly wasn't good. And then they showed the viewer a lower resolution video that, was just not quite as sharp and but with extremely high quality audio. And they asked which they thought looked better. Very important, not which they liked better, which looked better. So they asked to make a visual. And do you know, like the majority of people chose the lower quality video, but with the higher quality audio. I remember it just really like challenged a lot of the assumption. And so why do we talk about all this? The reason we talk about it is that I think, first of all, anyone working for even 3 days in video, building a workflow, operating a workflow, selling technologies, whatever, will know that video is hard. No two systems are built alike. They can use all the same standards, all the same tech buzzwords, and yet look completely different under the hood. That's why Arcadian exists. but I think I think it's a very useful instruction, for us to occasionally kind of check in, even on our own, dare I say, biases, biases. This technology is always better than that. Oh, this resolution is always better than that one. Oh, this codec is always better. This, just fill in the blank, is always better. Because again, going back to like my comment about THX, like, it's fascinating, right? At the end of the day, it's what does our user perceive, and do they walk away and say, wow, every time I watch that service, or watch that channel or watch, whatever, I love it. And everything else just doesn't seem as good. They can't quantify it. They don't need to quantify it. That's not their job. It's our job to understand,
absolutely,
why that is and deliver it.
One thing we come across is that there's no solution. I mean, sometimes people think that there's an answer to the question.
No, like off the shelf, like, that's what you need. You need model 773.
Yeah. A streaming service on high-end 4K TVs is going to have a very different requirement than a mobile, Southeast Asian audience that with different, like no G maybe, but you more LTE. So there's just like, there's a user, but sort of capital U user, but then there's the lower, like each platform, each streaming solution, everything you do. It's always a question of where do you compromise, I guess is the best way to put it. Because there's always some, like, this would be the way to do it if quality was your preferred. Like, I want the highest quality. Great. That's not going to work here. You're not going to have users. So I want, the most distribution possible. And you're like, great. Now you've compromised quality. And I want the cheapest solution. It's that triangle of product manager who use that is cheap, fast, and good. Yeah. And so every project has that. Where do you find the balance? They're all unique. You have
the levers, right? You've got to get them in, and every project is different. And well, that makes your job a challenge, but also really fun.
It is. I love it. We love that challenge. It's great. It's
great. Well, good. Joe, thank you again for coming on. Always love our talks. And actually, I really liked this one today because we went in some interesting directions.
We did. It was
previously
great.
We've not covered, and yet I think are so important. I just want to end on this note. I hinted at it, but I don't think it's inappropriate to say that we are starting to work quite closely with you and the team, and for anybody who's looking to deploy VPUs, and even if you're not, but you could use the help of Arcadian, then make sure you come talk to them. You can go to their website. Of course, they'll be at NAB. You can send me a DM. I'll connect you. There's Joe's online on LinkedIn. Very easy to find. But we are really excited because we have a very strong team to support our product, but that's like supporting the engine, right? So we have the mechanics to, make sure that engine's really humming and make sure it works. But, we don't work on brake systems.
Yep. That's what we're for. We'll fix your brakes.
We don't fix suspensions.
Yep.
So
that's where
we don't do body work.
Absolutely. We love body work.
So, but that's what, that's what your team can do. So. It's good.
Yeah, come by anytime. We love to have conversations. As you can tell, I could talk with Mark forever about all this stuff. It's a fascinating industry. I love.
Well, it's fun. It's neat, and there's a lot of war stories. When we were in Indonesia, a couple of weeks back, we were exchanging stories. Do you know this guy? Oh, did you work with this team over there?
Absolutely, and just to see it grow over the past 20 years and all the differences. I love having conversations about this stuff. And so if you want to have a conversation, and I'd love to hear what you're doing with your solution, what you've seen in the industry, all that's just interesting to me. Just stop by. I'd love to talk. I think that's the best part of this industry. It's lots of different takes and lots of different ways to look at how to build the car, right? We have our way we've done it, but I would love to find a new way to build a car or hear about someone else's car building stories, because that's what sort of gets me up in the morning and makes this fun for me is just to have these conversations. This is great.
Yeah. It's awesome. Well, good. Okay. Well, thanks, Joe. And, thank you to to our listeners, without you, we'd just be talking to ourselves, which maybe we would do anyway.
Yeah, that might be fun either way, but it's glad to have people listen in, and hopefully we can help someone.
It's fun to have actual listeners who occasionally will write in or, stop us at a trade show or, contact us and say, hey, we really like what you do.
Yeah, this is for the listeners.
If you are interested in joining Voices of Video, we are kickstarting our new season around NAB. And so just reach out to me. You can, send an inquiry through the website. There's a lot of ways to get in touch with us. And I'd be happy to hear what you're working on, see what you're doing. It does not have to be VPU oriented. It needs to be video oriented, but, reach out and I'd be happy to have a conversation, hear what you're building. So until next time, thank you again for listening. And as I sometimes say, happy encoding.